Right. All right, Ashley, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really good. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I saw your profile on LinkedIn and saw that you have the whole psychology background, and that is something I absolutely love. I love psychology so much. I know we talked about this before, but I just love everything about it. I studied it for a little bit, but and it really applies to everything I do. Um, but I'm curious how you found your way into that, and then I want to talk about kind of how you kind of shifted your path with that.
Yeah, it started really in high school. So our high
Yeah.
school offered an AP psychology class. So um, I took it because all of my friends were taking it, and
Okay.
that's why we take any class. Uh, but really enjoyed it. As you said, found it very fascinating. Um, and decided I wanted to pursue that for undergrad. It wasn't until I got into my probably more capstone classes. So those like junior, senior year classes that I really started looking more about what I could do with psychology. What do I like to do? How much debt do I want to take on post
Yeah,
college?
that's the big one, yeah.
Right? Yeah. And had a class that talked about marriage and family, marriage and the family, and
Okay.
discovered marriage and family therapy through that course. I think in hindsight, I always had a fascination with relationships,
Okay.
and that's transitioned into a lot of the work that I do now.
Yeah.
But yeah, decided I wanted to go full fledged into practicing marriage and family therapy. And so sought out my master's, did all of my postgraduate licensure requirements, started my own practice in 2014. Uh,
Okay.
2014, the year that my daughter was born.
Oh, wow.
Don't,
Lots. That's a big year.
yeah, I don't recommend that in hindsight. But nonetheless, I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
Started my practice then, and really in the last few years, specifically the last 2 years, have pivoted more to offering consulting services to financial advisors and firms. So
Yeah.
not quite like a 180, but
Yeah, but it's cool to see how it evolves. Because like when you were saying in college, you were taking a lot of psych classes, that's what you were majoring in. That was my major for a while too. And when you said, "Oh, I started to look at what I could do with psychology," that's when you found kind of more what you were passionate about. And then for me, when I got to that point, what can I do with psychology? I was like, I don't I don't think any of these things will work for me. Like, it's just not for me. It doesn't appeal to me. What am I going to do now? So then that's when I pivoted into communications and marketing. But I'm so glad I started in psychology because everything about communications and marketing is based in psychology. I'm not surprised marketing, I mean, at least when I was in college, it wasn't part of the program. But with communications and marketing, I'm surprised psychology isn't a huge part of that curriculum because it's literally everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it is now. If not,
Maybe, yeah.
hopefully soon in the future.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's been quite a few years, so it could have changed. I mean, when I was there, we didn't even talk about social media. So
Wow, yeah. Then that has been not that that dates you in any way.
a
Uh,
little, but not really.
well,
Yeah.
I understand that too. We weren't
Yeah.
talking about social media in mental health either.
Oh,
I
yeah. Yeah.
was in college or graduate school, so
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't even think about that connection too.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you said that you were always interested in relationships and that whole side of thing. So, how did you get into then the finance side of things?
Well, my husband's a financial planner, so that
Yeah.
kind of gave me a lot of insight
Yes.
into uh, the personal, financial planning part
Yeah.
of the field. I work with couples, still do, but 5 years ago, and really 10 years ago when I started, couples have been my niche, my specialty, and
Yeah.
started to notice maybe 2018, I guess. just a lot more issues around money coming up, at least on my couch.
Mm,
Maybe
yeah.
they were there prior to, and I just wasn't paying attention or didn't have the ear for it, but started noticing a lot more of financial issues coming to play and really not being equipped with the interventions, the tools, or the knowledge on how to
Mm,
help them. So,
yeah.
like any professional, client service facing professional that is stuck, you go to the internet and you start researching, trying to
Yeah.
figure things out. And found financial therapy, didn't even know that it was a thing,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
what it was about, started researching that a lot more, um,
Mhm.
reading a lot more, incorporating some of the practices. But then in 2022, I'm trying to get my timeline right.
Oh,
2020,
the last few years, like, once shutdown
I'm
hit,
like, oh,
it was like, "What year is it? How
yeah,
many years
like
ago
I
was
know that
that?"
happened,
It's
but when did that happen?
exactly.
Yeah, it was 2022. I went back to school to pursue a graduate certificate in financial therapy just to formalize really the education and help with certification. During that time is when I also was having maybe not an existential crisis by any means, but really like trying to figure out what else do I want to do,
Yeah.
simultaneously still working with clients with financial issues and um,
Yeah,
had
like how to combine the 2, right?
yeah, well, and I had a
Yeah.
client, who was sharing with me information about a meeting they had had with their financial advisor, and, this client was really upset by the way the advisor spoke to her,
Mm.
and felt really just dismissed, felt really, stupid, in her
Oh, yeah.
words, and I had this, like, moment where, I could have been really frustrated with him, like, "Oh, man, this jerk." But I actually had quite the opposite. I had such a compassionate, like, feeling for, like, "Man, I bet that he really didn't mean to, and if
Yeah,
he"
he probably doesn't even realize.
yeah, like, if
Yeah.
he knew or if he'd had the communication skills, or just understanding of how he communicates, I think that this situation would not have occurred. So
Yeah.
that really kind of sparked for me just an interest in being able to work more on the advisor side and helping them navigate relationships, incorporate, financial therapy, financial psychology competencies. And it's really just
Yeah.
kind of evolved from there.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, because I mean, both the fields, if you think about it, psychology, financial services, you're both dealing with people in sometimes vulnerable states. If people are, having issues with money or they're not sure, what steps to take next, or maybe they're embarrassed to talk about their spending habits or any of those things. Um, you're right, like, having that understanding of how someone's feeling or how you should approach the situation, like, to me, that sounds like they should have always been hand in hand.
You would think,
Yeah.
and in talking to my husband, he confirmed, like, at that time when, I guess it was probably 2012, 2013, somewhere around there when he was going through and getting his CFP.
Mhm.
Like, this is not like we don't talk really communication, like
Wow, yeah.
which, I'm with you. It's kind
Mhm.
of mind blowing. But
Yeah.
thankfully there is more of a push or movement for, advisors being able to have those skills now.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because even on the marketing side of things, when you're selling a long-term relationship, right? You're not necessarily selling the numbers and selling the I don't know, like, I mean, of course, people want their money to grow and work for them. That's a big part of it. But you're going to be working with that person for a long period of time. And so there has to be some level of trust and communication and even likability there
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. Um, I think I mentioned this to you before when I had worked at my old job and we would put on conferences for, the financial professionals. One of the leading topics, everyone in every survey after every conference, when we would say, what topics do you want? What kind of speakers do you want? Every, like the top topic every year was behavioral finance, which is, I mean, it's what you do. So there's definitely I guess there's definitely a gap in the market for it because people are always wanting more and more of that. And it's almost like the resource. I mean, I'm sure more resources are coming out. You're a perfect example of that. But it's definitely one of those things that I think more and more advisors are seeking out.
Yeah, I definitely see that. There's, some advisors and professionals are calling it different. I think behavioral finance is the most well-known or common, um,
Mhm.
you know, expression, category, phrase,
Yeah, yeah.
topic, around that. But there's also, the language of like human first,
Yeah.
first, or even life planning, not directly tied maybe to George Kinder and his work, but there's a lot of kind of different words, holistic,
Mhm.
even. I tend to gravitate more to the human first,
I like that.
just
Yeah.
because it speaks to really the focus,
Mhm.
my opinion, at least the focus of what the work should be, which is on the individual human. Uh,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of that interest that is growing, which is exciting,
Yeah.
exciting to see. And, also seeing how that plays into marketing as well, because as you and I have talked about, there's such
Yeah.
a big overlap to that, the language that
Oh,
we
yeah.
use, whether it's copy or, news, like however we communicate. This is your land,
Right.
otherwise.
No, you go for it.
There's such a draw, I think, for advisors right now towards learning how to do that. And
Mhm.
I think some of that comes from, a lot of research that's been coming out, but now just,
Yeah.
droves around, the importance of trust and the trust factor and how that plays into,
Mhm.
you said, those long-term relationships.
Yeah. And it makes me think too, I wonder if a lot of because a lot of our social interactions now are on display where
Mm.
they weren't before. With, of course, not that it's anything new at this point, but with, social media and all of that, I feel like a lot of our, um, uh, you know, social interactions, like I said, are on display. I mean, even interacting with companies and stuff online, like people can see what their clients or their customers are happy about or upset about, like in real time. Where before it was like, unless you conducted some type of survey or, really sat and talked with people, you didn't know. So um, maybe it's too that it's just people are more vocal in sharing now. It's more on display as well. So everyone can see the importance of that, like you said, human first approach to everything. And I've seen lots of um, businesses of all, niches using that approach, human first, across industries. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's generationally driven too.
that's very true. Yeah.
I'm a millennial.
Yep.
Um, and, I think that what we're starting to see as millennials are now, kind of 40, right? Kind of around that,
Hmm.
maybe kind of mid-career ish. Like you're starting to see really this gap or divide, maybe. And I think that younger kind of generations really value the communication and the
Oh,
relationship
yeah.
part. Not that other generations don't.
Right.
However, I think they just place greater importance on those things
Hmm.
now. So that's, my opinion. I'm sure
Yeah.
that may refute that or think differently, but that's at least from where I'm sitting. Uh,
Yeah. 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 I would agree with that from what I've seen too. Yeah. And so I'm curious, um what are some of your big goals with what you're doing now? And whether that's personal or just how you're helping others.
yeah, there's personal and professional.
Yeah.
So, I'll stick maybe more on the professional side, although there is overlap
Yeah.
there. But professionally, my work right now is really on
Mhm.
growing my, services, growing my client list. And to be specific, when I say my client list, I'm specifically meaning financial advisory firms. So,
Mhm.
how can I partner with more firms? Is what
Yeah.
I'm specifically focused on for this year, at least.
Nice.
And, kind of with all of that, comes the whole, marketing strategy,
Mhm.
getting online on socials and creating content that will hopefully help answer the question of what is it that I do and how is it that I help. So,
Yeah.
really, my focus this year is really just, end goal is acquiring more firms, partnering with more firms, and along the way, just being consistent with what it is that I'm putting out there in
Mhm.
order to educate, in order to hopefully attract, and,
Yeah.
maybe even, convince, advisors or firms that, hey, I want to work with her. So,
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's the whole goal. That's the whole point, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love and here's the thing, like, with when you're in business, it's like it's a constant you have to be in this constant state of building that awareness constantly because you're gonna get some clients today, but you're gonna get others 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. So it's this constant state of building awareness. So I'm curious, what all are you doing? What's working for you, maybe that you could share with others as well?
So I'm most active right now on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
um, LinkedIn and maybe Twitter,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
primarily LinkedIn. And so what I'm doing right now that I think it's working. Sometime will tell. Is really just posting Monday through Friday. I'm trying
Mhm.
to vary the type of posts that I'm creating. You've been immensely helpful just in, some of the information or content that you've put
Oh,
out,
good.
direction.
Thank you.
Yeah. Coming from operating a private practice, a private mental health practice, I'll be honest, and I don't mean this to sound like I'm tooting my own horn here, but I really didn't have to do a whole lot of marketing. Um,
Yeah.
the area that I'm in, it's, pretty big size, decent size.
Mhm.
And I put my listing up on Psychology Today and talked to a few primary care physicians and attorneys,
Mhm.
and word just kind of spread like wildfire. So I
Nice.
never had to really do a lot of intentional marketing with my
Mm.
private practice. As I've transitioned now into the advisory space and really creating services that are very new for the field, uh,
Yeah.
you know, um,
You're like,
I'm
"Wait a minute, this used to be
forced.
easier."
Yeah, like I had kind of a hard, 2 years ago, starting to do this was really hard.
Yeah.
Emotionally, just kind of the recognition of like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work. Um,
Yeah.
I guess I was either arrogant or naive, maybe both. I'm not sure, but it was kind of you hear people say this, oh, I thought if I just put this website up, like everyone, would come, like that would be sufficient. And
Right.
I don't know if I had that direct stream of thought, but there probably was that feeling there. So, kind of transitioning
Yeah.
now into creating like, a content strategy plan and being consistent like with that. I've
Mhm.
been very surprised at how much work it takes. How, you have to be really dedicated and consistent if it's going to work. Uh,
Yeah.
and, it's also mentally and emotionally taxing sometimes. Like there's a little bit
It
of a roller
can be.
coaster.
It can be. Yeah, like, one tip I can help, to say about that is and it's not always easy, but it's removing yourself emotionally as much as possible from that daily content creation. Okay, I maybe connected with 50 people, but only 10 responded. Like, you can't think about the others that didn't. It's really yeah, you have to just learn to kind of take your
Yeah.
emotions out of it for a little while, and
Yeah.
then
I'm getting
yeah,
better. I am getting better.
yeah, it's not
Um,
easy though.
it's definitely not. So
Yeah,
I do think that I'm getting a little bit better, but there are some times when, I'm like, oh, that's a really great, like, that's a great post. Like, I think this is going to
yeah,
land really well.
and
Or like,
then
that call to
yeah,
action is definitely gonna like bring people in, and then it's crickets.
Yes. And
I'm
that's why oh, sorry. But
I'm
that's why oh, sorry, go ahead. I keep
no,
interrupting.
I was just gonna say, like, it's been a little easier, but initially, um,
Yeah.
that was hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that you shared all of that because that is something that, like you said, you were in a certain space that maybe made it, and this is not to discredit you or anything at all, but maybe you were in a space that it was easier to get those referrals or to get those, clients. And I think a lot of times then when people do transition into the online space, they think, oh, I get referrals, word of mouth all the time. The same thing's going to happen online. And it's like, yes, it can, but it takes so much buildup first. It's like I always say, it's like investing. You don't put $1,000 in tonight and wake up with $10,000. It compounds over time. So yeah, yeah. So I'm really glad you shared that and kind of realized that, oh man, there's a little bit of extra work I got to put in and show up and network and talk to people but you can have
Yeah,
fun with it too. I mean, that's how we met,
that's
right?
very true. That is
Right?
very
Yeah. So I think there's definitely a lot of pros and cons to it. And I think too, in today's world, we really do live in a hybrid social world. So, a lot of times, even if people are, because I often say, even if you're getting word of mouth business, I bet you a large portion of those that are hearing about you word of mouth are hearing about you from a friend and then they go Google you, or they're hearing about you from a family member and instead of calling right away, they go look at your website or they go follow you on social media. So
true.
it's like even the word of mouth is happening online too. So they definitely do both work together for sure.
Yeah, it's something that I do that,
Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
I recognize that, and that's also been
Yeah.
part of the realization, I guess, of needing consistency, like, within my, right now, just my digital presence, so
Yeah.
have to be consistent.
Yeah.
I can get kind of judgy myself personally, like, if I go to find somebody, and then I'm like, "Ugh, they haven't done this in, like, 6 months, like,
Right.
what are they doing?" Um,
Yeah, I know I do the
or
same.
super
Yeah.
judgmental, right? Um, so knowing that, I am probably the worst of the worst when it comes to that,
No, I think
just
you're doing
trying
pretty good.
just trying to make sure that it doesn't appear to be that way, with
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
Yeah, because too, especially if businesses are showing up on social media, like you're pretty much saying to the world, "Hey, this is a form that you can reach us. Like we're here, you can reach out to us." But then what I see happening is people are showing up on social media, but they're not showing up consistently or they're not monitoring it. And so people will reach out or they'll ask questions in the comments and I see those questions go unanswered. I see comments like companies just not responding to any of the comments. I myself have reached out. This has happened so many times that I've almost stopped doing it if I notice they're not active on social. Is I reached out to a landscape company, for example, and said, "Hey, I'm looking to have this, this, and this done." Didn't hear back from them for 3 months.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, the seasons change, so we need that done right away, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've had that happen a lot of times. I wanted to hire a photographer, and I found a photographer and reached out to him and was complimenting his work, and he just liked my message and then never responded. I'm like, oh, that was the perfect opportunity to say, "Hey, how can I help you?"
yeah, yeah.
Right? Just like your storefront, how can I help you?
I think though that from that aspect, at least digitally,
Mhm.
and I don't, there's probably some psychology kind of wrapped up in here, but I don't know what specifically maybe to name it. But,
Yeah.
when like I've had folks maybe compliment or things like that.
Mhm.
And for me, and maybe this is something that's kind of different than what you're saying, like for me, taking it to the next step to know like this is a potential, maybe customer, if you will, or
Mhm.
client, like how to then sell yourself or kind of convert, I think is right. Is that the marketing
Okay. Yeah,
language?
yeah, yeah.
Like, I think, for some people, maybe at least I know myself, like, how, like, is that an opportunity, like, where you need to do that? There might be just some question there. It could also
Mhm.
come from a place of, self-esteem. as well, or confidence.
Yeah, that can be part of it too. Yeah.
I don't know, but hearing you say that kind of made me think at least about my own, but also too, I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
to therapists. I'm like, I wonder if that photographer, if he struggles with self-esteem and believing in his own business or his self.
Right?
I don't know.
No,
Probably.
you're very yeah, it's very true. That is very true. Yeah. And it's what I liked, I'm the first, I'm in marketing, all of that. I'm the first to say I never cold pitch that I'm just not like that. Like I'll reach out to people and say like, "Hey, I'd love to chat with you," or things like that, but it's never a I just want to get to know people and I want to hear their story and I want to see, if I could help and if they're interested. I'm never going to push or chase because what's the point? I don't want to work with someone who I have to chase anyway, right? So, even if someone say someone were to comment on your post or give you a compliment about that post or, oh, I didn't know this. Um, even something as simple as a thank you or hey, if you'd like to know information, I'd love to, chat with you. Just anything simple like that. I mean, just think about when you're out in public, you hold a door for someone and they say, oh, thank you. But then you notice the person who just ignores you and doesn't say thank you. You don't feel warm to them. You don't feel like you would wanna hang out with them or, it's simply building relationships on the most simplistic level, um, because people will remember how you made them feel, even if it's the smallest thing, and that will help make you stick in their minds. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
just simply doing that and then showing up consistently. You said about a psychology term, you're not sure what it is, and maybe you've heard of this, your insight, you do psychology. The mirror exposure, effect, mirror exposure theory. Yeah, and it's just simply being there, being present, and the more someone sees you or comes across you or interacts with you, they're just more likely to take notice.
Yeah.
And then that can lead into, um the, uh, the endowment effect, which is once someone starts to get attached to you, they know you, they trust you, they know what to expect. It's easier to then be like, "Okay, well, I know she does this. I'm gonna go and reach out to her and see if she can help me," because it is a chore to then go out and make that connection with, another person, 5 other people to compare. "I know you do this, I'm gonna reach out to you."
Yeah. That's how I
Yeah.
operate.
Yep.
To my husband's frustration. Uh, when it comes to to certain things, but
Yeah.
hearing you like kind of talk about it in that way, like the in kind of the trust factor, like one of the things
Mhm.
that I coach or share about is around trust and the factors that go into really the foundation of trust and safety, and
Yeah, and
consistency is
that's
one of
huge
them.
when you're working with money.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's one thing if you have, the intelligence, if you have, the knowledge, like that's great, but that's also expected. Um,
yes, I'm glad you brought that up too.
yeah, that's
Like the bare minimum.
yeah, bare minimum, like I expect you to know what you're doing, but
Yeah,
being consistent, being reliable,
yeah,
being, accessible, all of those things really go into, answering that question for clients at least is, you know, are you going to be there for me? You know,
exactly.
at the end
Yeah,
of the day. So I like that. I like thinking, I haven't thought maybe too much um, about that in
yeah,
terms of marketing, social media, digital presence, but maybe if
yeah,
I did, that would be helpful
yes.
as well.
Yeah, it really is. So it's because I know, like you said, maybe some people are or have that, hesitation where maybe they're not as confident or things, and I just think, don't even think about your services, like, don't even be thinking about it, just think, "Oh, I'm making friends or I'm connecting with people," because really that's what leads to the rest. It really does. I always say, how do I say it? I say, "Give first and the sale will follow." Just give your attention, give your time, and people will reach out. Actually, I have a great example. I have a connection who reached out to me just a couple weeks ago, and she wants to work together. and she sent me an audio message and she said, "Oh, I'm finally ready to like work on this. I just had to do some other things." And she goes, "It's always been you." That is the best compliment I think I could have ever gotten.
Yeah.
We've been connected for probably 2 years.
Wow.
And she said, "It's always been you." So it's like you just never know who you're gonna connect with. Um, and so it's just like, just show up and be genuine and connect with people and make friends, and you just don't know where it'll lead.
It's very true. It is
Yeah.
something that, while, I don't know if I would say success, but
Mhm.
the success, for lack of a better word, that I have had
Yeah.
um, in this space, but also in the mental health space, has been a byproduct of exactly what you're talking about. Just showing
Yeah.
up and, giving, but also seeking connection and
Mhm.
working on the relational side of it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a strategy that's worked for me. I know it's a strategy that may not work for everyone.
Right,
I
right.
do feel like when you are providing a service, when you're in the service industry,
Yeah,
that
for sure.
if you put the relationship first, usually the success, then will follow.
Exactly. Yeah. Because again, like I said earlier, that's what you're selling, right? Is the relationship. The service, yeah, that's what you're seeking, but you wanna like who you're working with.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's not like you're just buying a product and you don't have to, like, talk to anybody.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of the psychology side of things and working with clients, are there any major, uh, tips that you want to give or any maybe things that you see consistently that you think would be helpful to share about?
Yeah, one of the biggest approaches, strategies that I like to talk about, but also bring up in my coaching is the idea of self work. And really, it's not an idea, it's a
Mm,
practice, but the practice of self work. Um,
yeah.
in the mental health space, like we are taught from really the very beginning of our graduate education that in order to be a good clinician, in order to be a good provider, practitioner, you have to know yourself and
Oh,
you have
such a good point.
to go ahead really and accept this idea that, this is ongoing work. We
Yeah.
evolve as humans, we are constantly changing. And the work that we put into knowing who we are, understanding who we are, and, maybe recalibrating or making adjustments along the way, it is lifelong work. And
Mm,
that, while we talk about that a lot in the mental health space, one of the things that I feel very strongly about in, helping advisors with their own well-being is really the idea of putting in the time, investing in yourself to do your own work. Now,
mm.
doesn't mean that you have to go to therapy in order to
Yeah.
do that, but it does mean being very intentional with what it is that you're reading, your
Mm,
self care practices, if you will, understanding your communication techniques. How do you come across? Being able to increase
yeah.
that level of awareness, both from an internal but also external side, is
Mm,
immensely helpful in not only creating long term relationships with your clients, but it also will translate in other ways like, your digital presence and, your
yeah.
marketing, just everything else. So, the biggest thing that I, like to shed light on is, being, doing the work yourself, putting in the time, to know who you are and understand why it is that you do what you do,
Mm,
and making that just a continual habit to take the time to do that.
yeah. That is a really good point. I didn't think you were gonna go that way, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that makes that makes total sense." Because and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but, like, I don't know, let's just say a hypothetical situation. Um, Maybe someone got into financial services because, I don't know, their family really struggled with money or something, so they have habits that maybe they're recommending, um, to clients that they don't realize have that bias, maybe, things like that? Because I know with marketing, it's the same thing, like, you know.
We all have biases, and
Yeah.
I talk about advisors having their own biases. Behavioral finance and even like psychology is like a general like it really focuses on looking outward. So outward meaning at
Mm,
the client and who
yeah.
they are. And I think where there's a disconnect is that there's not enough emphasis on also looking at the practitioner side. Who is the
Yeah.
person who is influencing this, maybe decision or person, or the relationship? Like, what's the other side of the equation here?
Yeah.
Especially like for financial planning, like there's a reciprocity there between advisor and client. And if you're just
Mhm.
so focused on like the client side, you're missing a huge opportunity, to understand the relationship more as a whole or the system as a whole. So,
Oh, I
um,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, I think that it's a way of thinking that's really helped, me in my own mental health career. Um,
Mhm.
as it has a lot of other clinicians. And my hope is, to bring more awareness to the personal financial planning space to help advisors understand how they contribute to the relationship, good, bad, ugly, just
Yeah.
all of the ways, how
Yeah.
they show up. What does that bring? Because you're right. If an advisor has, a particular set of biases that are really strong, whether they be social biases or cognitive, or memory. That's, I think, the third one,
Mm.
around psychological biases. If they have like any of those, like it's going to impact the relationship.
Oh,
The
yeah.
the other part of that is that in impacting the relationship, or engaging really in that relationship, is that we have this effect called countertransference. And
Mm.
so, like responding, to the client's response, in a way that
Okay.
maybe signals some unresolved issues within yourself. So one of the
Okay.
common things that I think about is like projecting. um,
Yeah.
things like that. But countertransference, could also be if an advisor is working with a couple who is enabling their adult, children. And maybe perhaps this advisor comes from a family where, their siblings are financially enabled by, his parents. And
Mm.
there's a lot of, frustration, unresolved feelings around that. Inadvertently, he or she could place those unresolved feelings then on the client by maybe coming down too hard on the older
Oh,
couple.
yeah.
Things like that are, we don't really think about, but
Yeah. Makes total sense, though.
yeah, it's an important part of that self work and self exploration, is just understanding, yourself in that way so that you can show up, with your clients and be the best, healthiest version of yourself.
I love that. I love that, and it makes total sense. And, as you were saying that, I was like, this is kind of true on the marketing side too. Because I've worked with clients where, um, they might say, "Oh, I hate social media. I don't like social media." I'm like, "Look, not everyone has to be on social media. We don't have to do that, but it can be really helpful." But or "I don't like social media," or "I don't do this," or "I don't like to read long emails, therefore no one else likes to read long emails," or "I don't like to watch long videos, therefore no one else likes to watch long form video, so I'm not gonna do it." When in fact, that might be the best strategy for you. So, yeah, it's interesting how that now that you say that, I can see it on my end too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I can
interesting.
see that. Yeah, that would make sense even from that lens too, where it would show up. And,
Yeah.
probably see this with your clients. I see this with advisors, and I've seen it with my own therapy clients, is the risk of, continuing down that path and keeping that really like rigid, maybe perspective, or
Mhm.
not being willing to engage in any kind of self-work exploration, that those people miss a lot of really great opportunities.
Yeah.
Or sometimes even worse, they, maybe lose clients, or
Mm. Yeah.
um, you know, cause some type of, maybe harm to themselves, make
Mhm.
things more difficult for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's all very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so is there tell us, where can people find you? What kind of, I know you talked about what you do, but what services do you offer? Share what you'd like, and where people can find you.
Yeah. So I am on LinkedIn mostly,
Mhm.
Ashley Quamme. I also have a website. It's www.beyondthef.com. FP, so Beyond the Financial Plan, FP.com. So those are probably the two primary places, and there are spots on both of those where you can reach out and contact me. But
Great.
apart from reaching out or finding me there, a lot of the services, and I've shared a little bit today, that I provide are really teaming up with advisors, advisory firms, and serving as their financial behavior officer in a fractional capacity. So, not a full time employee, not in a full time role, but really just in a fractional way, being a team member and offering
Yeah.
office hours to discuss client cases, facilitating or co facilitating client meetings, especially around maybe more difficult scenarios that
Mm,
may involve some behavioral biases or psychology or just emotional struggles. I'll
yeah.
come in and help with those. And I also do assessments and help with onboarding clients, implementing assessments, and
Wow,
yeah,
nice.
several other things. So, really, just kind of
Yeah.
that team member for firms who really have a desire to, provide or expand the service offerings in a way that help them to understand their clients in a deeper way.
I really like that because a lot of advisors might not have, a lot of advisors are small business owners and they don't have the really maybe need or even bandwidth to hire someone full time just to do that specific role. So to have someone that they can partner with to step in when needed
Yeah,
is, I think, really beneficial.
yeah, it's been great so
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, good. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all that. As you know, I'm always fascinated with these topics and I could talk to you so much longer on this on this. So I'm sure we'll chat again, but yeah, thank you so much and of course, I will have all your information below for people to reach out to you. Thanks.